Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of pieces I go to write and I'm like, I don't think this is something that's going to be tied to my identity or a human experience. Because I think going back to the identity question, I mean, another thing that's important about my identity is just experiences that other people can relate to. Some of my pieces are not about being queer, but maybe are about other sensitive topics that we just don't talk about a lot, like, death or family drama, things that are uncomfortable, but other people can relate to and maybe have experienced. And that's another part of identity is just, these sort of things that we all, well, maybe not we all, but I mean, the death thing we all, but
Yeah, sure.
things that we all, kind of have to face and experience at some point, and sort of this demystifying of some of these experiences, not just, the trans and queer experience. Demystifying that, of course, is important to me, but also demystifying things like, yeah, we're all going to die one day. How do we deal with that? How do we face that?
Do you know the book? I'll have to quickly search for it, but it's a collection of writing by Tōru Takemitsu, who is one of my all-time favorite composers from the 20th century.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, it's this collection of writing by Takemitsu. I think it's something like On Silence. And he talks about how in his music, he doesn't see silence as, like rests, which I would argue none of us should see silence as rests anyway. It's still music, or vice versa. And he's essentially saying that like silence in his music is his way of confronting the inevitability of death. And I don't know if that, you would hear that from his music necessarily. I don't think like none of his pieces to my knowledge are like titled anything like, related to death, but just reading that like totally changed how I think about still silence in music in general, but also silence in my music, kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good thought. Death was something that made me really uncomfortable, and just sort of our mortality was the whole thing that scared me. And just the idea of like, okay, one day we're not going to be, you know, I don't know if I believe in souls and stuff, but one day our soul is not going to be in our body anymore. Our consciousness won't be there. That might be better. So the idea of, okay, one day our bodies will be empty. Okay, so that was something that made me really uncomfortable. So what did I do? I went on YouTube and started watching a bunch of videos from a mortician. I don't remember what her name is, but Ask a Mortician is the YouTube channel's name.
Yeah.
And I loved her videos. They really helped me become a lot more comfortable with the idea of death and the idea of, okay, yeah, having a plan for when you die. What do you want to do with your body? There's lots of cool options. You could have it turned into a record. You could use it to fertilize a plant. You could have it chucked down into a coral reef off of Miami Beach. I mean, there's lots of options that, beyond just being, in a box in the ground. I mean, if that's what you want, though, that's really awesome too. But just sort of like seeing it as something like, yeah, this is something we all experience. This is a very, human experience. And also just the idea, of course, like, okay, we never know when it'll happen to us. We never know when it'll happen to others, So just sort of this sort of unpredictability, and just sort of doing things to make it more manageable and predictable by saying, okay, whenever it does happen, I would like this to happen with my remains, or, talking about it with others.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Micromaker by Loose Leaf Transmissions. We hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into the inner workings of the creative life. If this resonated with you, be sure to check out the full conversation on Music Maker with Tyler Kline, a podcast exploring craft and process, philosophy and inspiration, and the honest, often messy parts of being an artist, creative uncertainty, purpose and identity, and resilience. You can find Music Maker wherever you get your podcasts, or by visiting musicmakerpodcast.com.